So tonight we continue with our study on children and the kingdom agenda. And Dan has mainly been doing this study, but last week we had Tammy, and we'll have others that will bring lessons on it. And tonight I get to come to you with a lesson about children. And the kingdom agenda, it has been defined, but I just want to give another short definition. When we say the kingdom agenda, we mean this is how to live the Christian life as a truly transformed new creation, how to live it as a Christian. And God's word applies to every area of our lives. So right now we're discussing family life, and I'm talking about children, and talking to children mainly. There are not a lot of children in here. But as Tony Evans says in the book, we're all children of someone. And as Pastor Don said, every Christian is a child of God. And so it is our relationship to God, our relationship to our parents, but also children. And I'll mention some about parents too. And if you're not a parent, don't check out when I go there. Whether you be a future parent or in some way you have an influence on kids' life, it's important. So at the outset, I just want to say, before we get into our main text for tonight, that our study on family life and our study on anything is always for the glory of God in the life of a Christian. So when we study about how to have a good family, it is how to have a good family in Christ. Because if you have a well-put-together family that is fully functional and seems to be going great, but is not Christ-centered, does not have Christ, you are no better off than someone that may have a dysfunctional family, and yet they are in Christ. And so the most important thing is the gospel and faith in Jesus Christ, clinging to him with everything you have. But saying that, we are to strive to have good families, to live with a truly transformed heart that overflows into our family life. It's something we work at, and that has to be cultivated. It's part of the good fruit that the Bible talks about. So we'll start in Ephesians chapter 6 tonight, and verses 1 through 3. And it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land." So there are two responsibilities as children. One is obedience, and one is honor, that we find in this verse. So we're going to start with obedience tonight. It says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." But somehow it seems that the word obedience today in our society has taken on a bad connotation. We almost see it as a form of slavery, and we recoil at the fact that we would have to obey. We feel like we can take someone's suggestion, but obedience seems almost too forceful of a word. And yet it's biblical. So in family life, children are to obey, and we are to obey God, our Father. But this mindset of recoiling at obedience reveals both a misunderstanding of the word and, more tragically, a lurking rebellious spirit. I'd like to read an excerpt from the book from Tony Evans. And he's just talking about our society and how it is overrun with rebellion today. And there's a strange role reversal. So this is what he says. "You don't have to have teenagers to know that we are living in a day of changing values and role reversals. The culture has turned up the heat on our families. As this thing boils, what has come to the top is a very rebellious spirit that tells children to ignore, disregard, and disobey their parents, and all authority for that matter. We are in a culture of rebellion. Instead of children obey your parents, we could rewrite the command today, parents obey your children. I don't think many people will disagree with the statement that the roles of parent and child have been turned upside down in our culture. We could say that what we are seeing today is the adultification of children. Even the legal structures of our society have been busy decreasing parental authority and increasing children's rights. So a child or teenager today is faced with a culture that says, rebel. So we are bombarded with the fact that we should rebel. And just watching commercials, I know there's a Ram commercial, a Dodge Ram truck commercial that is based on the fact of you hear all the thoughts of the mother saying, if someone jumped off a cliff, would you jump off too? And all sorts of things coming at them of what the mother would say. And rebellion is celebrated in the fact of go off and do what you want to do. And so it's, even in the smallest things, rebellion is almost celebrated in our culture. But the challenge for us as Christians is, if you want to rebel against the norm, the status quo, if you want to rebel against culture, turn that passion for Jesus. You can rebel against the many lies that society is trying to feed you. Lies like there is no absolute truth, or that your greatest pursuit should be your own happiness, whatever the cost, and that happiness cannot be found in God. Rebel against the lie that we just have to try and do our best and simply make the world a better place. Rebel against the lie that money is God, that abortion is not murder, or that it's just an alternative lifestyle. Rebel against the lie that you can have religion and enjoy sin too, that God is a fabrication to offer false comfort, that Mother Nature causes blizzards, that evolution makes any sense at all, or 1,000 other things. We should embrace with abandon the grace of God in the person of Jesus Christ. Combat these lies with the gospel, rebel, and be different. So a few weeks back, Dan talked about how marriage is a type of the relationship between Christ and the church. And the relationship between children and parents, I wouldn't call it an official type, but there are many similarities between our earthly relationship and the relationship we have with God. Christians are called children of God. He is the parent to be obeyed and honored. And if we have a right idea of how we should approach and interact with God, we will know how to handle earthly relationships and vice versa. But if our idea of who God is and how we should approach him is skewed, we will get everything else wrong. Ephesians 6:1 says that we should obey parents in the Lord, which could be translated as unto the Lord, and it's found that way in a few other places. Obey your parents as unto the Lord. In the book of Colossians, there is a blurb on Christian households. In Colossians chapter 3, and specifically verse 20, it speaks to children. And it says, "Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord." And this is another part where Paul is talking to servants. He says, "Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service, as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ." Both these commands to children and to servants contain the phrase, "obey in everything." So it seems almost right to link the terms of obedience together. Just as workers should not obey bosses just when they are watching, the same goes for children. Children, obey your parents in everything, not just when they're watching, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, let your obedience be wholehearted, as unto God and not just your parents. For you will receive the inheritance. You are following Christ, and he is the great and matchless reward, the pearl of great price, the treasure in a field. And this seems unattainable to do it at all times and not just when you're watching, or try to not do it with a full heart. It makes it hard when it's every moment of every day and all the time. But God is able to help even children do this. Dr. Evans speaks to this when he says, obedience to parents is comparable to obedience to God, when what their parents are asking them to do agrees with God's instructions. Let me say it another way. When a child rebels against his parents, God looks at that as rebellion against himself. It is an attempted coup against the kingdom. So when a child raises his fist against his mother and father because he doesn't like their instruction and doesn't want to obey it, God looks at that as raising a fist in his face. And no one can raise a fist in God's face and expect to get away with it. So this is a huge responsibility on children. But there is a responsibility to parents as well, found in this verse. The responsibility is to teach children in the Lord so that our obedience can be on target. There's a famous proverb, Proverbs 22:6, that says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. So there is always much conversation about this verse and whether it's a proverb, is it a promise, what is it? Well, it's a proverb. I'll just say it. It is not 100% guaranteed that if parents teach diligently and model practically the gospel and the commands of Jesus, that their children will be Christians as well. But I will say this. The Bible-saturated teaching that you pour yourself into as parents, the prayers that you pour out, the life that you model, is a testimony. It is a picture that will never leave the brains of your children. It will lodge into their hearts. It will stay in their minds, even if it is in the bottom cellar of their minds, way down deep. It will stay there. And in tough times, those words, that life, will come back and will call to them. It is not in vain. Children are not saved simply because they have godly parents. We know that for a fact. We each have to come to the realization of salvation on our own. But the influence of our parents is invaluable. To the redeemed child, it is precious. To the rebellious child, it is haunting, it is convicting, and may one day lead to the salvation of their souls. So this is slightly directed to parents, to Christian parents, to press on, to not lose hope, to keep praying, because we read in the Word that Jesus specializes in leaving the 99 and bringing back wayward sheep. And he is very adept at turning wolves into lambs. So we should train children in the way of the Lord. So getting to the second part of verse 1 in Ephesians 6, why are we to obey our parents as children? Because it's as unto God. And simply because God told us to. It seems like a simple answer, but it's true. Why are we to obey God? Because He created us. And He is the most absolute reality and final say in every situation, whether we choose to accept that or not. His way goes. In this sense, our obedience should be absolute, because he will never lead us to do something wrong or to do something evil. Verse 1 says, we are to obey, for this is right. God is always right, just, and holy in all he does. In Psalm 145:17, it says, the Lord is righteous in all his ways and kind in all his works. And in Psalm 18:30, as for God, his way is perfect. The Lord's word is flawless. He shields all who take refuge in him. So everything God does is right, and everything that God does is for our good as well, to the good of the believer. Think about it. With biblical obedience comes close family relationship. We are shielded from all the junk that is out there to destroy us, especially if you've had or have godly parents. They are trying to lead you in the way of life. They're not working to spoil every bit of happiness out of your life. Many of the things we think will make us happy, but are not permitted to do, is for our own good. A lot of the, but everyone else is doing it, feelings that children have lead them off the path of life. Your Christian parents don't let you do things for a reason. Everybody else might be doing it, but you are not everybody else. Your parents are trying to mold you into the kind of person that is ready to receive grace, that is ready to live a committed Christian life. Even the smallest thing that seems innocuous or innocent at the time may lead you down a road that at the end you will wonder, how did I get here? And will regret it. Your parents are working for your own good. And God works for our good. God works for his glory. This is also demonstrated in the way that God ordained the structure of the family. Like I said before, the parent-child relationship is a picture of the relationship between God the Father and his children. If we believe that we exist to glorify God in all things, then we should pay special attention to our family life, because we are preaching every day. God's relationship with his children is one of joy, one of peace, love, discipline, security, compassion, and mercy on his part, and reciprocated joy, peace, love, as well as submission, obedience, respect, honor, and admiration on our part. So it should be with our earthly families. With our life, we can point to how great of a Father God is, and by so doing, glorify him. And it's for our good, because we get all the benefits that I just mentioned, a relationship that is both fulfilling and comforting when done right. And I realize when I say all of this, I'm speaking idealistically. This is not the case in every single family. This should be our goal, what we aim for. But what if my family situation is not like that? The simple answer is to obey in what you can. Those things that do not contradict God's word, obey, be obedient. But this also leads us into the second responsibility of children, which is honor. Show your parents honor and respect. In Ephesians 6:2, it says, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. This is directed to children at any stage of life. Whether you're 4, whether you're 64, honor and respect are commanded. Again, this is the responsibility of children, but parents have a responsibility in this as well. It is taught at a young age and over the course of many years. It's not one time sitting down and saying, "See here, you're supposed to honor me, so get with it." It's not that. It's teaching and modeling honor. And this is evidenced in the way that parents treat their children, to treat even the child with honor, and how they treat others with honor. If parents are constantly criticizing or scrutinizing, putting down their children, whether it be in private or in public, or doing that to others, to their face or behind their back, that's not going to sit well, and that's not an example you want your children to exemplify. Because eventually this will be exhibited towards parents. It may be towards others at first, but it's going to be a constant battle. I was blessed to have parents that don't do this, who have never done it, and who continue not to do it, and who are a great example of how to do this. Because it's not only honor in front of people, but it's not going home and complaining and tearing people down behind their backs when they're not there. So this all starts at a young age, teaching obedience and honor. I found a short explanation of what honor for parents is this comes from gotquestions.com, which is a great resource, I should say. It says, honoring your father and mother is being respectful in word and action and having an inward attitude of esteem for their position. The Greek word for honor means to revere, prize, and value. Honor is giving respect, not only for merit, but also for rank. For example, some Americans may disagree with the president's decisions, but they should still respect his position as leader of their country. Similarly, children of all ages should honor their parents, regardless of whether or not their parents deserve honor. So in the book, Tony Evans lists 3 ways that we can honor our parents. First, we can emotionally honor our parents, and this includes simply spending time with them. For the younger in-house crowd, this means not rolling your eyes or complaining every time you're stuck with having to do what your parents want to do, or having to leave the house and not being able to spend an extra 3 hours playing PS4 or Xbox. To actually be engaged in your parents' lives and to enjoy their company and not just be a passive roommate for 18 years. For the out-of-the-house group, this means consciously maintaining a relationship. Don't let it die. God put you together at birth. There are a lot of parents in nursing homes neglected by their grown children. Don't be one of those. Second, there is verbal honoring, and this includes speaking well of your parents. Again, for the younger crowd, he's not your old man, he's your father. Parents should be spoken to and about with honor. And for all of us, even if they are wrong, treat them with respect. And like we said before, this treating with respect is not like, okay, I'm respecting you, but I really, deep down, I can't stand you. This is not a superficial thing. And if it is, it's not really honor at all. Outwardly being respectful and courteous and kind, and yet inwardly complaining and feeling resentment towards someone, or straight out hating someone's guts, is not going to cut it. God is all about the heart. In everything, it's always about the heart. In salvation, this is why salvation is not merely a change of actions, to stop doing the bad things that you love to do and start doing the good things that you hate to do. But salvation is a change of heart, so that now we want to do the right and hate to do the wrong. And the same applies here. Heartfelt honor should be a desire to honor your parents. Not merely because you're obligated or because you have to or because it's in the Bible, but because you want to. So with that, I get to number 3, which is financially honoring. And that includes merely providing for parents that can't provide for themselves. When they get older or in need of medical care and need assistance, we're to be there for them. And Paul has strong words regarding this in 1 Timothy 5:8. He says, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his own household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Those seem like pretty strong words. But think about it. It's only right. Your mom carried you for 9 months and then through pain birthed you. She spent all her energy staying up late while you cried and wouldn't stop. She cleaned up after you. She provided meals through your whole childhood. And maybe some of you say, well, I didn't like some of those meals, but you ate. Your father, he taught you all you needed to know to make it in life. And he worked very hard, most likely to make ends meet. This alone deserves honor. Dr. Evans mentions a man in the book, an elder in his church, whose father left when the elder was just a child. The father fell ill, and the elder went to the hospital regularly to be with his father, even though none of the other kids would have anything to do with him. And Dr. Evans says, this elder was showing his father honor, not because he was a great dad, but because his position as father deserved respect. And who knows, this man's honor may win his father to Christ. So we're moving on to the 3rd verse of Ephesians 6. And this contains the promise to those who do honor their parents, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. The simple interpretation to this verse is that if you honor your parents and don't do crazy, risky, dangerous, destructive, stupid things to your body, then you'll live longer. If you don't fill your body with alcohol or drugs or frequent sketchy locations, you'll be better off, no doubt. But past this, remember we talked about disobedience to parents equating to obedience to God. Those who obey God receive everlasting life. They live long. When you obey parents, you obey God, because God told us to obey our parents. And when you obey God, you have an inheritance that is eternal. We have verses like John 6:29, where Jesus answers his disciples who were asking him, what work should we do? And Jesus says, this is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. So when we think of work, we think of it being us doing something, obeying God. God has told us to believe in him, and we do this work. We are obeying God in believing in him. And in John 3:16, we know that it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. So those who believe in him have everlasting life. And last, in John 14:23, Jesus replied and said, anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. So obedience to parents, that comes from obedience to God, which is belief in God, leads to everlasting life. There are great promises to the obedient and to the displayers of honor. And for the last bit that I have here, this is just my little added-on part, which talks about the gospel and children, how it relates to how we should approach the gospel, and also how the gospel should be involved in children's lives. Because, like Pastor Don was saying, this is why we're here. This is the most important thing. We could be the most moral people in the whole world, still go to hell if we did not believe the gospel. So this next bit is for children, but really it's mainly for adults. And it's just a plea that I've always felt and that I felt went here. So my plea is that we teach children about the God that's found in the pages of the Bible, and not just a made-up version that we make up ourselves. Because I really believe that we shortchange kids by not portraying a God who is almighty, who is worthy of time, effort, and worship, one who loves explosively, and one who hates sin the same way. One who has provided grace to live a life pleasing to Him. And yes, this is going to look different at different stages of life, but there's so much more that we can offer. Because teaching children goes so much deeper than coloring or snacks or crafts or clever games. Because countless adults who are lost today were in that. They were raised in kids and youth classes that poured all their energy into promoting fun recreational activities, yet serving up spiritual crumbs. I know some of them. They had a blast in youth group, but they don't know God. Most of them are not committing crimes. They're not getting into constant trouble today. They are very contented moralists, satisfied with living life as an upstanding citizen in the community, keeping their nose clean and doing it all without acknowledging God or placing any importance on this kingdom agenda. Very nice people, but deceived by a singly moralistic gospel rather than a transformative one that demands devotion. So we need the power of the gospel in those who are coming up, in those who are this next generation. More than anything, we need the power of the gospel to be radically infatuated with this good news. We have to be before we can pass anything on to others. And this is speaking towards the preteen, teenage kids. If you're approaching them, feed them the word. I don't think I'm overgeneralizing when I say that in most cases, disinterest to God's word in someone this age is not inability to understand, but it's boredom or hardness of heart. And the remedy is not to make church more exciting by using worldly means, but to pray for God to supernaturally open eyes, to raise dead souls, and to make new creations. My dad sends out videos every week. Some of you might get them. Hopefully you'll watch them. But they're really good, and they're challenging. And this past week, the topic, if you watched it, was church pragmatism. Everybody today is trying to find something that works, to get more people to church, to get people involved, to save people. But the main point was that Christianity has never worked. Salvation, devotion, desire for God is a supernatural work. We read it in the pages of Scripture. The cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those who believe, to those who are being saved, it is the power of God. So the answer to getting kids excited about church is not following trends, and is not staying up to date with the latest or the greatest. Rather, it is getting kids excited, not about church, but about God. Who He is, what He does, through gospel-centered preaching, through modeled living, and through prayer. Because I hear it a lot. Everyone says that kids are so smart today. They are. Pull out of the air any fix to whatever technical issue you may be having. You have a phone, hand it to a 9-year-old. He'll probably figure it out. And they handled trigonometry and calculus and even higher maths that I probably can't pronounce in school. They excel at most anything that they put their minds to. Well, my plea is that we challenge all of us, but challenge children to set our minds on things above and not on things below. Challenge us to pursue the deep things of God, to catch a vision and to dive headlong into the ocean waves of God's Word. When I was younger and in a church or Sunday school lesson, and sometimes I felt like I was getting a dumbed-down version of something, and now that I see it happening in different classes and in just the way that things are taught, I told Vanessa I'd say this. I've always felt inwardly to say, don't treat us like we're stupid. We can understand. You don't have to dumb it down. I'm not an idiot. We don't need a different approach. We don't need more coddling to biblical teaching. We just need to be challenged to develop a deeper relationship with Christ and to be shown His beauty in His Word. So, end of that. Going on to how being a child relates to the gospel. How we should act as children in regards to the gospel. Luke 18:16 through 17. Jesus called them to him, saying, "Let the children come to me, and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God. Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it." So be humble in heart. Jesus said that unless you become like a child, you will not be saved. What are the qualities of children Jesus was pointing to? There are 3 that I listed: humility, trust, and dependence. He's not saying that you should be immature like a child or throw a tantrum like a child, or you'll never be saved. He's saying things like Matthew 18:2 through 4. Calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." This humble, dependent, faith-like trust, something unfortunately not found in as many children today as was the case then. This is the childlike trait Jesus wants us to emulate. So the challenge to children, don't lose that. You don't know it all, and you can't do it alone. Parents are given to us for a reason. And for all of us in this gospel focus, let's learn and be humble before God. Because we know that God resists the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. Let's trust Him. Romans 10:11. As the scriptures tell us, anyone who trusts in Him will never be disgraced or put to shame. And lastly, let's depend on Him desperately. John 15:4 through 5. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. So our dependence is singly on Him. This is how we as children approach the gospel. So as we close and as we come to the front for prayer, this is about children, but it is also, as Pastor Don said, about the gospel and about souls being saved, people being transformed. So as children, yes, we have a responsibility that we should fulfill to our parents. And as grown children, there's a responsibility to parents. And as children of God, there is a responsibility that we have to God. And He has charged us with these demands to go and spread the good news. But as we come, I ask that as you come, there are a lot of needs, but tonight that we would focus on being better children, being better parents, all for the glory of God. So as we come, we can have that in mind, and the altar is open. And as Dan always says, there's no official ending time. So whenever you're done up here, we're done. But you can stay up here all night. Well, they'll be practicing behind you, but it doesn't mean you have to leave. So let's go.